Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our first day of Narnia Camp. My name is Corey Olson, the president of Signum University, and I've been known around the internet for a long time as the Tolkien professor. What a lot of people don't know is that, I originally discovered Tolkien because I loved Narnia first. One of the most formative moments, one of the most important moments of my whole childhood was I was 7 years old and my parents read the Chronicles of Narnia to me. Um, and it was the best thing I had ever read in my entire life. It was really reading Narnia that changed my life, and as I say, it definitely led to my um, my discovery of Tolkien as well. I was originally given my copy of The Hobbit by a cousin of mine who had heard that I had just read the Narnia books. And he said to me, well, if you like those, you'll like this too. And so he gave me The Hobbit, and that's how I discovered The Hobbit and Tolkien. So anyway, all of this is to say that the Chronicles of Narnia have always been a really, really important part of my life. And I am really, really glad that we're able to do a new summer camp this year on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, of course, the first book of the Chronicles of Narnia. And I'm super glad that you guys could join me, and I hope that you really enjoy not only your talks with Ms. Mundo here during our live sessions, but also talking amongst yourselves, doing projects and games and things that are provided for you in the program packet that you've been given. So anyway, I just here to share the excitement of starting your camp with you here today. And without further ado, I will hand you over. You are in the excellent hands of Jen Raimundo. She is one of our Signum University master's graduates and is a wonderful scholar. And she has a lot to offer you on C.S. Lewis and on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in particular. So I'm really delighted to hand you over to Jen, and I hope you guys have a really great and fun camp. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Corey. All right, so can everyone see and hear me? My name is Jennifer Mundo, as Corey said, and I am really excited to be able to teach The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to you all because it was one of my favorite books growing up and remains one of my favorite books, the whole Narnia series. And one of the things I like about it the most is how it shows wonder and it captures a magical feeling about everyday life. So in our first session today, I'm going to be talking more about how there are two worlds going on in this book and how there's a wonder that connects both of them. So that's what we'll be kind of messing around with today, and I'm sure that you will continue that theme in whatever it is you're doing for your camp. To start off, I want to say welcome. I'm glad that you're able to join us, and it's just an honor to be able to be talking about this book with you all. So I think you can see the slideshow. So I called this session This One and That One, referring to our two worlds that we're talking about today. We have this world, so the one you and I are familiar with, and that world, which is Narnia, what we'll be exploring for the next few weeks. Obviously, this whole presentation is based on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. And yeah, so without further ado, we will plunge into the book. So this world, you see there's a map of this world. It's the one that you and I have grown up in and hopefully have come to love and enjoy and struggle with. You'll see through this book that it's helping us deal with this world by exploring another world. So when we start this book, let me go to the next slide. It starts out this way. Once there were 4 children whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. This story is about something that happened to them when they were sent away from London during the war because of the air raids. All right, so we have 4 children. They are siblings. Their names are Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. And then the author, C.S. Lewis, refers to a war. So right from the beginning, we see that there are some hard things in this world, including a war and air raids. So what war is C.S. Lewis talking about here? It's World War II that hit very close to home in London. So this is not set right outside London. But London is where Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy are from. So what are these air raids that are being talked about? Let's go to this next slide. All right, the air raids. The air raids that Lewis refers to, it's an event that took place during the Second World War. For Englanders, it's 39 to 45. And it was called the Blitzkrieg. The Axis Air Force was trying to bomb different parts of England to intimidate them and take over, and specifically London. So in real life, in this world, there were many children who were evacuated to the countryside, and C.S. Lewis himself took in some of these World War II children. So when Lewis is writing about this, he's talking about the real world and he's writing from experience. And that's an important thing to keep in mind throughout the book, is that while there's a lot of strangeness in a very magical sort of way, it's all based on reality that the people originally reading this book and the person writing this book lived through. So when we're going to see things from another world and we'll be exploring things from this world, don't forget that it's all based on experiences from this world. That is some of the setting of the book itself. All right, so let's get into this story. These 4 children were sent to the house of an old professor who lived in the heart of the country, 10 miles from the nearest railway station and 2 miles from the nearest post office. He had no wife, and he lived in a very large house with a housekeeper called Mrs. Macready and 3 servants. Their names were Ivy, Margaret, and Betty, but they do not come into this story much. He himself was a very old man with shaggy white hair, which grew over most of his face as well as on his head, and they liked him almost at once. But on the first evening when he came out to meet them at the front door, he was so odd-looking that Lucy, who was the youngest, was a little afraid of him, and Edmund, who was the next youngest, wanted to laugh and had to keep on pretending he was blowing his nose to hide it. So this is from chapter 1 of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So when we read this, we read about a house and a professor who owns the house and his servants, and they all have very to that time common names: Ivy, Margaret, Betty. In the time of writing this book, it's a pretty normal situation, but for these children, it's a completely new situation. They're having to flee London, so this is all unfamiliar for them in this real world setting. And we see Lucy's response to the professor himself, who is an eccentric professor, but also very real world. She responds to him as someone who is so odd looking that she's a little afraid, but she likes him very much. And Edmund almost wants to laugh at it. So we're beginning to see some responses to strangeness and wonder, even in this normal world setting. And throughout the chapter, we'll begin to see how these responses to even more wonderful things continue to grow. All right, so before moving on, just to recap, we have a very normal real world setting, and we have children who are already experiencing a bit of shock at having to run away from the homes they're familiar with. but they're supposedly going to another familiar setting, at least a setting that would have been common to Englanders at the time, a country residence with an owner and some maids. So we have just a little bit of the unfamiliar creeping in already, but not enough that it's completely startling. So going to the next slide. All right, what do we do in a slightly unfamiliar setting? We explore, as Peter says. So everyone agreed to exploring, and that was how the adventures began. So Lewis lets us know that this is an adventure book. We should be looking for the things that are unfamiliar, for the things that are strange and wonderful and maybe even magical. It was the sort of house that you never seem to come to the end of, and it was full of unexpected places. The first few doors they tried led only into spare bedrooms, as everyone had expected that they would. But soon they came to a very long room full of pictures, and there they found a suit of armor. And after that was a room all hung with green, with a harp in one corner. And then came 3 steps down and 5 steps up, and then a kind of little upstairs hall and a door that led out into a balcony, and then a whole series of rooms that led into each other and were lined with books, most of them very old books, and some bigger than a Bible in a church. And shortly after that, they looked into a room that was quite empty, except for one big wardrobe, the sort that has a looking glass in the door. So this is also from chapter 1 of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So something very interesting is happening in this passage. We are being described this country manor, which, again, is a normal part of English life, but it's kind of an exciting normal part of English life. And for these children who are used to living in the city, it's a pretty new experience. So C.S. Lewis has opened up the door a little bit into strange wonder. But now he's starting to describe the house. And if you notice in this description, he opens it up with adventures. So we're already thinking, okay, where is the adventure, Lewis? Now we are seeing a house that you never seem to come to the end of. So we see this house. It's huge. And it's topsy-turvy. It has stairways and passages that don't seem to make sense. The text that we just read is a little disorienting, but really exciting because you're exploring a house. It's pretty amazing how Lewis is able to capture that wonder of exploring a new place in this one paragraph. I don't know if you've ever explored a house before, but it's one of my favorite things to do. And there's always something exciting behind every door, or at least it's fun to think so. And in this case, C.S. Lewis is showing that there's actually some exciting things behind some of these doors, like, wouldn't you like to come across a suit of armor in a house, or a very long room full of pictures? And each of those pictures has its own story, right? So we're already being opened into worlds in this passage. There was a room all hung with green. That's a little amazing. And there's a harp in one corner. I don't know if you've ever seen a harp before, but those instruments take up a good deal of space and they're pretty ornate. They are very well decorated and they sound magical. They're associated with magic in a lot of cultures. And then Lewis describes us going down 3 steps, but then up 5 steps. So who knows how this house is making sense, right? You would think if you go down 3 steps, you'll go back up 3 steps, but no, you're going up 5 steps. So this house is designed in a very special, fun sort of way. And then they go onto a balcony. A lot of our houses don't have balconies in the States, right? But there are some other cultures that still have balconies. I come from a culture in the Caribbean that has balconies everywhere, but to us, it's pretty exciting, right? You get to look out across the vista before you and imagine. Balconies are very good imagining places. So Lewis is giving us more and more introduction to strange, wonderful worlds. And that culminates or ends in a room that was lined with books. Now, for Lewis, who's writing an adventure story, books, big books, they're all each an adventure in themselves. So we are opening a storybook that's opening even more stories to us as we explore this house with pictures and books and harps. The magic just keeps piling in if we're looking for it. And Lewis, by showing that this is an adventure story with that first sentence, that this is how the adventures began, he's telling us, okay, I want you to look for the adventures. And then this whole paragraph, if you think about it from that perspective, is already full of adventures. All right. And then the paragraph ends in something mysterious. It could be very normal if we wanted it to be normal, but we don't want it to be normal, right? Because we're looking for an adventure. Shortly after, they looked into a room that was quite empty except for one big wardrobe, the sort that has a looking glass in the door. All right. It's an empty room. That's pretty boring, except it has a big wardrobe. Are wardrobes exciting? Do you know what a wardrobe is? It's basically, it looks like a bookshelf, but it has doors and you put clothes in it instead of books. All right. Doesn't seem like a very exciting piece of furniture, but if you're looking for adventures, it very well could be. All right. So that is one part of the story, that we're in a pretty normal place, but we're looking for adventures, and Lewis is giving us some reason to think that adventures will be coming. Now, what about the characters, though? We have the setting. Let's look at the characters. We have 4 children, Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. We start to see a little bit of their character in this first chapter. So let's go into that. What do we know about what the 4 children are like from these chapters? Lewis helps us by giving us some very interesting conversation between the siblings. And here they're talking about the old professor that has been kind enough to take them in. Susan, the second oldest, says, I think he's an old dear. Edmund, who's the third oldest, or the second to last youngest, says, oh, come off it, said Edmund, who was tired and pretending not to be tired, which always made him bad-tempered. Don't go on talking like that. Like what? Said Susan. And anyway, it's time you were in bed. Trying to talk like mother, said Edmund. And who are you to say when I'm to go to bed? Go to bed yourself. Hadn't we all better go to bed, said Lucy. There's sure to be a row if we're heard talking here. So the quote continues. No, there won't, said Peter. I tell you, this is the sort of house where no one's going to mind what we do. Anyway, they won't hear us. It's about 10 minutes' walk from here down to that dining room, and any amount of stairs and passages in between. What's that noise? Said Lucy suddenly. It was a far larger house than she had ever been in before, and the thought of all those long passages and rows of doors leading into empty rooms was beginning to make her feel a little creepy. It's only a bird, silly, said Edmund. All right. So in this passage, we see the characters starting to come out as they interact with their settings. When you respond to something that's new, a little bit of your personality and your character and your beliefs come out, right? So this is a really great context for Lewis to be introducing his characters to us. They're responding to a new person to take care of them, who is the professor, and a new place to live in, which is this big old manor house. All right, so going back up a slide, we see Susan. Now, she's the oldest girl, and she's being pretty motherly, as Edmund points out, and in some good ways and in some maybe annoying ways. I don't know if you ever had an older sibling or someone who wants to take care of you and you might not want to be taken care of that way, but they're really looking out for you. So that's kind of the role that Susan is playing. She says that Edmund needs to go to bed. She's trying to make the situation calm, that the professor is really an old dear. He's nothing to be worried about. But then we have Edmund, right? And he is in that position where he's not the oldest, but he wants to be the oldest, right? So he's trying to be all grown up and mature. He's pretending not to be tired, but that's only making the matter worse because he's becoming a little grumpy because he's really tired. So we have Edmund, who's not really sure who he is. He's trying to be something that he's not. He's trying to be the oldest, and he's not the oldest. Then we have Susan, who's being a mom, and she's trying to cover for the family that they're not with their parents. But she can do that in a few annoying ways. Then we have Lucy. And Lucy, what does Lucy do here? She says, hadn't we all better go to bed? She's just trying to calm the situation down by ending any conflict. We're seeing Lucy being a peacemaker. And she's a little frightened, but she's also a little brave. She's saying, hey, here's the solution to our problem. Let's just be good and go to bed, right? And then we hear the voice of Peter, and he's the oldest. So he is kind of in that role where he's somewhat in charge, but he's pretty young too. So how is he going to deal with that? So we have Peter here explaining the situation to them, trying to give them a game plan. He says, this is a house where nobody's going to mind what they do, or they won't hear us if they do mind. And he's already gauged how long it is from the dining room to all the different places in the house. He's got a plan, and he's trying to show his siblings what they can and can't do. So he's responding with a little bit of courage, a little bit of leadership, but maybe he's not really sure what he's doing yet either. But then we come back to Lucy, and she has a little bit of fear, right? She hears a noise in the house, and it's a strange house, strange noise. She doesn't know what it is, and she starts to feel a little creepy. She seems to be really in tune with all of the strange and magical possibilities that this house can hold. And sometimes she responds with curiosity, and sometimes she responds with fear. And then Edmund comes in. Edmund, of course, trying to be the one who's pretending not to be afraid, the one who's pretending not to be tired, the one who's pretending to really be the grown-up. He's saying, oh, it's only a bird. Now, was it a bird? Lewis doesn't tell us. But Edmund always comes with a very normal and on top of it explanation for everything going on. Okay, so just in that brief passage, Lewis has introduced us to the characters by how they're interacting with their setting. So that was this world, the world that we're familiar with, the world that we live in. But now we're going to be getting into that world, which is Narnia. So here you see a map of Narnia. And we are dealing with the part that says Narnia, as opposed to, say, Ettonsmoor or Archenland. Those are for other stories for other times. So, was Lucy ready? Was she ready to get into Narnia? Lucy is the youngest of the children. We've seen that she seems to be a bit in tune with the possibilities that the household contains, maybe things that aren't so normal. It could have been a normal bird, but she was thinking maybe it's not a normal bird. She sees all of these passageways and is wondering, what could those passageways really have? And we've seen that she's a little curious, she's a peacemaker, but she's also a little afraid. Okay, so as they explore the house, they come to this wardrobe room, remember, in the spare room. So Peter, being the oldest, he's explaining the situation again. Oh, there's nothing in this room, said Peter, and they all trooped out again, all except Lucy. She stayed behind because she thought it would be worthwhile trying the door of the wardrobe, even though she felt almost sure that it would be locked. To her surprise, it opened quite easily, and 2 mothballs dropped out. All right, so what's special about Lucy here? She sees a normal situation, and she knows what will probably be the normal situation, that the wardrobe is locked, that it's just a normal wardrobe. But she wants to open the wardrobe anyway. She wants to keep exploring, even in a place that looks normal. So again, we see Lucy having a bit of an imagination. If you were to walk into a room with just a wardrobe, would you want to open it? I don't know. That's a question that only you can answer. Do you like to make up games or think that there might be something behind closed doors? Lucy seems to be that sort of a person. She wants to keep exploring. She's curious. She might be a little fearful, but she's not afraid of opening all those spare room doors. She's not afraid of opening the wardrobe. So, even though she thought it would be locked, it wasn't locked. So she gets to explore whatever's in the wardrobe. Now, what was in the wardrobe? It could have just been coats. And she still thought it was worth it. She still thought it was worth to explore something that seemed normal to find out what was there. So this is a really important part to Lucy. She's curious and she's eager to see things that are beyond what she just sees. She wants to figure out or discover fun, wonderful things in what just seem to be normal, everyday things, like a wardrobe. So was Lucy ready to find Narnia? It looks like it. She looks like someone who was ready to think that Narnia could be found. But we're getting ahead of ourselves because we haven't found Narnia yet. All right. She opens the wardrobe. And when she does so, she felt a little frightened, but she felt very inquisitive and excited as well. So you see this combination in Lucy already. She's a little scared, but she's more inquisitive and she's excited, so she's going to keep exploring. She looked back over her shoulder, and there, between the dark tree trunks, because she's entered the wardrobe and has come into these woods, which aren't the fur coats that she was expecting to find and stop there. So she's in this snowy place. So as she looked between the dark tree trunks, she could still see the open doorway of the wardrobe and even catch a glimpse of the empty room from which she had set out. She had, of course, left the door open, for she knew that it is a very silly thing to shut oneself into a wardrobe. It seemed to be still daylight there, so she's looking back through the wardrobe, now in Narnia, now in this dark snowy wood. She's looking back. She's going to make sure that the door remains open, because remember, she's not dumb, and she's a little cautious, so she wants to make sure she can still go back into the world she's familiar with. She sees a light there, so she keeps a light on her reality. And then she thinks to herself, well, I can always get back if anything goes wrong, thought Lucy. She began to walk forward, crunch, crunch over the snow, and through the wood toward the other light. So she sees another light. She keeps moving towards the lights. Okay, so this is important about Lucy. She's cautious, but she's excited, and she always gravitates to light. In about 10 minutes, she reached it and found it was a lamppost. As she stood looking at it, wondering why there was a lamppost in the middle of a wood, and wondering what to do next, she heard a pitter-patter of feet coming toward her. And soon after that, a very strange person stepped out from among the trees into the light of the lamppost. So Lucy is going from light to light as she crosses the threshold of two worlds. She has just crossed from this world, Earth, into Narnia. Now, she doesn't know what she's crossed into yet, but she knows that she's moving towards the light in the dark and snowy wood. All right, so when she gets there, she starts to hear a pitter-patter. Now, knowing what we know about Lucy, do you think that she's going to be frightened? Maybe, probably a little, but do we think that her fear is going to make her turn back? No, she's too excited, she's too curious, and she wants to see what the light is all about, right? So keep that in mind about Lucy. But then also think about, why on earth is a lamppost in the middle of a wood? Okay, I don't know how familiar we all are with lampposts anymore, because frankly, the ones that we see every day on the road are not as pretty as the lampposts that used to be. But they were pretty normal. They're normal for us now, the big, big, tall ones that light the streets at night, before they have a very specific look that Lewis is talking about, and we'll see that in a picture coming up. But they were pretty normal in the 1950s and the 1940s too. This is another normal, everyday object that is suddenly put in a brand new world. So, what's this brand new world? This dark and snowy wood. If you've read the sorts of stories that Lewis has hoped you've read, you'll know that very interesting things happen in the woods, and that whole new worlds of possibilities can be met in the woods. Some of them are very, very scary. Some of them are very wonderful and magical. So Lewis has put this inquisitive, curious, slightly scared girl in the middle of a big wood in the light of a very normal thing, a lamppost. So, and then there's another character coming on stage. What's going to happen? All right, next slide. We meet Mr. Tumnus. And this is the first character that we meet who belongs to another world in this story. So we're going to be asking what is familiar and what is strange about Mr. Tumnus. All right. When he first comes on, he's described as a very strange person, this pitter-pattering into the light of the lamppost. He's half human and he's half goat, so he's a faun, and we'll get to that in a minute. But, so he's half normal and he's half very not normal. And he's in a very not normal place, but he's doing and wearing pretty normal things. He has a scarf on, he's carrying an umbrella of all things, and he's holding packages like any person in England in the 1940s could have been doing coming home from work or from shopping. So again, we have something very normal about him. But then we go back to something that's not normal. He's pitter-pattering. Many times, most of the time, humans don't pitter-patter. And he's also holding his tail. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't really tend to hold a tail because I don't have one. And I probably wouldn't hold one if I did. But Mr. Fawn is here, Mr. Tumnus, holding his tail, and he's pitter-pattering. So we've got some very normal things. We've got some very not normal things going on with this guy. Now, how do you think, again, Lucy is going to respond to Mr. Tumnus, this man from the other world? All right, let's first meet Mr. Tumnus. He was only a little taller than Lucy herself, and he carried over his head an umbrella, white with snow. From the waist upward, he was like a man, but his legs were shaped like a goat's. The hair on them was glossy black, and instead of feet, he had goat's hooves. He also had a tail, but Lucy did not notice this at first because it was neatly caught up over the arm that held the umbrella so as to keep it from trailing in the snow. He had a red woolen muffler round his neck, and his skin was rather reddish too. He had a strange but pleasant little face with a short pointed beard and curly hair, and out of the hair there stuck 2 horns, one on each side of his forehead. One of his hands, as I've said, held the umbrella, and the other arm he carried several brown paper parcels. What with the parcels in the snow, it looked just as if he had been doing his Christmas shopping. He was a faun. All right, so we meet Mr. Tumnus. We find a few things that are a little frightening about him. He has 2 horns on his head, and he has a tail, and he has hooves. Now, that's not exactly a comforting image. But he's also, he has a pleasant face. He is carrying Christmas packages, maybe. And he seems like a neat person. He's making sure his tail doesn't get dirty in the snow. And he's only a little taller than Lucy. He's not a very imposing creature. And half of him looks like just a regular nice man. So what's going on with Mr. Tumnus? Who is he? What is he like? I think Lewis is doing a really good job of showing us the possibilities of meeting something new, of coming into a new world. It could be bad, it could be good, it could just be unknown. It's definitely unknown. We don't know if it's bad or good, or maybe both. Okay, so the rest of what we're looking at today is figuring out what do we do with a new world or a new setting, because our new world doesn't have to be a really new world like Narnia. It could just be anything new in our own lives. And so we're going to watch Lucy gauging this new world and this new world character. All right, how does Lucy treat this new character? Is she a little afraid? Again, probably, but is that going to stop her? No. All right, so she says, "Good evening." But the fawn was so busy picking up its parcels, because he was frightened at her, that at first it did not reply. When it had finished, it made her a little bow. Good evening, said the fawn. Excuse me, I don't want to be inquisitive, but should I be right in thinking that you are a daughter of Eve? My name's Lucy, said she, not quite understanding him. But you are, forgive me, you are what they call a girl? Asked the fawn. Of course I'm a girl, said Lucy. You are, in fact, human? Of course I'm human, said Lucy, still a little puzzled. So, first thing to note, Lucy speaks to this fawn, which of course she's never seen a fawn before. She doesn't probably even know what a fawn is, but she addresses him very politely. Good evening. She's confident, at least she's acting confident, and she's kind, right? So we see a little bit more into Lucy's character. She's a peacemaker. She is curious. She's excited. She's eager. She's a little shy and scared, but when it comes down to it, she's going to be kind and she's going to be confident. And then we see the fawn replying in a very polite way too, in a very proper English sort of way. And now that's curious because, of course, we're in a new world. We're in Narnia. We have no rules. There's no reason to think that Narnia needs to be like our world, and yet we have a fawn who's responding to Lucy in a very proper, very polite, very nice English way. Good evening, excuse me. So these are some positive things in Mr. Tumnus's favor, right? He knows how to be polished, he knows how to be nice, he knows how to be kind and polite. But then he asks a strange question. We've gotten a bit of a normal introduction, and then suddenly he is strange again. Should I be right in thinking that you are a daughter of Eve? All right, so this daughter of Eve thing. In traditional Christian biblical texts, the Eve is the first human. So anybody who's a daughter of Eve is a human girl. So this is a very strange sort of way of asking Lucy if she's a real human girl. Now, what does that question imply? If I'm asking you if you're human, does that mean that I think everybody's a human that I can talk to? Nope. It means that you could very possibly not be a human, right? So Mr. Tumnus is coming from a world where he can talk to people who maybe not are human. They might not be humans. So that's strange. He asks a very simple thing, are you human, in a very strange way. And that itself is a very strange thing. Of course, aren't we all humans? Not in Narnia. All right. But Lucy, not really sure what he's talking about. She says, well, I'm Lucy. She's got a very simple sense of who she is. I am Lucy. And that's also important for Lucy throughout the rest of the book. She has a pretty clear, simple, confident understanding of who Lucy is. I'm Lucy. Then the fawn explains. He follows up the question. Wait. I'm not, I want to know this very specific fact. Are you what they call a girl? Now, is being a girl or being a boy strange in this world? No. Everybody's that. Everybody's human. But not again in Narnia. The fawn's not quite sure that she's a girl or a human. So of course I'm a girl. You're human? Well, of course I'm human. So we're seeing a culture clash here. We're seeing two worlds come together, and it's very, very confusing. It's very puzzling. So we're seeing Lucy being put in an unknown context, trying to figure out a puzzling situation. And honestly, if you think about it, we've all been put in these situations. We're seeing here, in an imaginative way, something play out that we all have to face every day. Something that is new, something we don't understand, and something that we want to respond to well. So Lewis is showing us how slightly shy but eager, kind girl is dealing with a new situation. And so far, she's doing it pretty well, even though she's pretty puzzled. All right, so this is the two worlds meeting. We have now come to where we're learning what Narnia is. So, of course, Lucy wants to gather information. If she's not sure where she is, who this fawn is, she's just been told she's in Narnia. So what's she going to do? She's going to ask. When we are in a new situation, we think, I don't know what the situation is. You want to ask the person who does know. So Lucy says, Narnia, what's that? This is the land of Narnia, said the fawn, where we are now. All that lies between the lamppost and the great castle of Cara Paravel on the eastern sea. And you? You have come from the wild woods of the West? I got in through the wardrobe in the spare room, said Lucy. Ah, said Mr. Tumnus in a rather melancholy voice. If only I had worked harder at geography when I was a little fawn. I should no doubt know all about those strange countries. It is too late now. But they aren't countries at all, said Lucy, almost laughing. It's only just back there. At least, I'm not sure. It's summer there. Meanwhile, said Mr. Tumnus, it is winter in Narnia, and has been for ever so long, and we shall both catch cold if we stand here talking in the snow. Daughter of Eve, from the far land of spare where eternal summer reigns, around the bright city of wardrobe, how would it be if you came and had tea with me? All right, so here we have again this clash of the familiar and the strange in Mr. Tumnus and Lucy's conversation. Mr. Tumnus has no idea what a spare room is or what a wardrobe is, and we also find out that Narnia has a completely different time schedule than Lucy's world, than the Earth, because it's winter in Narnia, and it has been for a very, very long time. And we also start to get a hint of the story, right? Because Mr. Tumnus is rather longingly thinking about summer and rather sadly thinking about how it's been winter for forever in Narnia. But the familiar creeps back in, right? We've had a very, very strange conversation. I mean, how would you feel if you walked up to someone and met them and they didn't know what a house was? That's kind of what's going on here. Of course, Mr. Tumnus knows what a house is, but it's kind of the same thing. A wardrobe is as basic as a house in our world, and Mr. Tumnus doesn't seem to know what that is. So we have a very, very strange thing and a very grand introduction to Lucy, a very grand address that she's daughter of Eve from a far land called Spare with eternal summer. This is very, very grand. And then he follows up all of that with, how would it be if you came and had tea with me? Now, if you were a little English girl in the 1940s, having tea would be a very, very, very normal thing to do. It would be like your mom or your friend saying, hey, let's go to Taco Bell or something. It's just regular. It's something you do. Maybe you don't have Taco Bell every day. Probably not. That's probably a good thing. But you would probably have tea every day. So it's even more normal than going through a fast food drive-through. So Mr. Tumnus keeps on mixing the strange and the familiar for Lucy. So we see Lewis showing us that even strange things have very familiar parts to them, and that maybe things that are very familiar could have a little bit of strangeness that we're missing. So Lewis, by bringing Lucy to this new world called Narnia and introducing her to a half-normal fawn, is making us think, well, how do I respond to new situations in my life, in this world? And what's strange about things that I think normal? And what could be normal about things that I think are strange? And this is a question that we should be asking ourselves as we go throughout the book. All right. So we saw the picture of Lucy and the fawn in the wood, and now we're going to see it again. Lucy found herself walking through the wood, arm in arm with this strange creature, as if they had known one another all their lives. All right, so Lucy becomes a friend with a fawn. Was she ready for that? Was she ready to meet something new? Yeah, she's kind, she's confident, she's shy, she's cautious, and she's eager and she's curious. So she has an outlook on life that was letting her be ready to meet something new and to find something new. She found something new and she treated him with kindness, and suddenly she finds herself interacting with something very strange and very wonderful. All right, so that's how Lucy sees the fawn, but how does Narnia see us? All right, she goes to the cave, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to read through everything, but when she finds the fawn's cave, she sees that it has some very nice, cozy things about it. That's kind of sweet and familiar again. But then on the bookshelf, Mr. Tumnus's books have titles like The Life and Letters of Silenus. Does that seem normal to you? Or Nymphs and Their Ways? Or Men, Monks, and Gamekeepers, A Study in Popular Legend? Or Is Man a Myth? Now, especially that last title, Is Man a Myth? Mr. Tumnus, as normal as he seems, he has a nice cozy cave and tea. He is still trying to figure out if man is a myth or not. That's curious. And he keeps on addressing her as Daughter of Eve, rather than Lucy, or Girl, or Lucy, right? Because that's who Lucy is. She's Lucy. And he still thinks of her as Daughter of Eve. But she had a wonderful tea. And as we see in this picture, that looks like a pretty normal little British tea room, except there's a fawn. So this is pretty strange. It's very familiar, but it's very, very strange. And the strangeness becomes even greater and even more wonderful as he begins to tell, as Mr. Tumnus begins to tell tales about Narnia. In Narnia, there are nymphs who dance, who live in wells, and dryads who dance with fauns. Now, many of the people reading this might not even know what a nymph is or a dryad is. You might not know. And that doesn't really matter right now. What matters is that it's something different. It's something not part of the world we're familiar with. There were long hunting parties that you could find the milk white stag and he'd give you a wish. Is that something you'd find in this world? Can you feast and find treasure with red dwarves? All of these things that are wonderful jollification for weeks on end. These are the memories that Mr. Tumnus has of Narnia when it was in the summer, even though now we're in the winter. So we have this wonderful, beautiful picture of what Narnia has been, and we find that the beauty is not part of this world, right? And then we have this crushing end of the paragraph where Mr. Tumnus says, it's always winter now. So Narnia is in trouble. That's something that we learn from the beginning. It's strange, it's familiar, it's wonderful, and it's in trouble. Okay? Because the next character from Narnia we're introduced to is the White Witch. And throughout the story, again, I'm not going to read through it for the sake of time, but we find that Mr. Tumnus, as kind as he has been, and as familiar as he has acted, for the most part, he's under the pay of the White Witch. Of course, Lucy doesn't know what that means, so he explains to her that he is trying to kidnap Lucy. And he keeps on again calling her Daughter of Eve. Why is that important? Well, because he has been seeing Lucy as a person that the White Witch wants him to kidnap. The White Witch, for some reason or other, wants all daughters of Eve, all humans, to be captured and brought to her. She does not want humans in Narnia. So the strangeness of the world is becoming greater and greater as Mr. Tumnus is telling Lucy what's been going on in his head this whole time, that he's been nice and taking her to tea. He's actually being a very bad fawn, as he describes himself, all for the sake of handing Lucy over to the White Witch. Now, how does Lucy respond to this? She's just been told that she's being kidnapped. She's realizing that she's in a very bad situation and that she's in a completely strange place and that she's being kidnapped. And that the person that has been kind to her is trying to do a very bad thing, but he's telling, hey, I don't want to do this. He's crying. He doesn't want to do this. So he seems to be in something against his will. And so Lucy is still trying to see beyond what's just in the situation. She sees that the fawn is really upset about having to do this because he has genuinely become her friend. And she says, I'm sure that you won't do anything of the sort. And again, we see her trying not to be too hard on him, but she realizes that he's really trying to kidnap her. All right? He is, the full confession, trying to kidnap Lucy. How does Lucy respond to this? Well, she responds very confidently. She's a little scared. Obviously, we've just seen that her face turns white. But she says, please let me go home. She puts her foot down and says, no, you're not going to do this. And what do we say about Mr. Tumnus? As he has become strange, he's told strange stories, he's under pay of this white witch, he seems much more strange than when we met him under the lamppost, right? But then he comes around and acts like a familiar friend. Of course I will, said the fawn. Of course I'm going to take you home. I've got to. I see that now. I hadn't known what humans were like before I met you. Of course I can't give you up to the White Witch. Not now that I know you. But we must be off at once. Okay, so he realizes that this friendship with Lucy is more important than anything bad that he was going to do with the White Witch. He is not going to kidnap her. He has become a friend. So something that is terribly strange and wonderfully strange, but also very scarily strange, is more importantly becoming a friend. All right, because of the way that Lucy has treated him. And so there's now a friendship between two worlds. And that is how this book gets started off. We learn about Lucy, especially that her character, her personality, what she's looking for in her own world is opening her up to the magic that is in Narnia, to the strangeness that is in Narnia, but also to the friends that are in Narnia, to the new good things that are in Narnia. And we find that meeting new situations isn't always safe. So we're beginning to be alerted to the fact that we need wisdom when we are facing a new situation, but also that we don't have to be afraid, even if there are things to be afraid of, because Lucy, even though she's a little girl, she's the youngest of the 4 children. She overcomes that with a kindness and a curiosity that puts her fear to one side and lets her be bold, as we've seen. And that turns the strange Mr. Tumnus into a friend who's willing to go against his own world, his familiar, in order to help her, this strange girl. Okay, so that's the friendship, and we see it forged here, where they both go back to their places, to their proper places. Mr. Tumnus goes back to Narnia and to his cave, and Lucy goes back to her real world, to the earth, but as friends now. So Mr. Tumnus says, farewell, daughter of Eve. Perhaps I may keep the handkerchief, for Lucy had given him a handkerchief when he was crying about how bad of a fawn he was. And Lucy says, rather. And then she ran toward the far-off patch of daylight as quickly as her legs would carry her. So Lucy is still seeking the light. She still runs back to her familiar, but she has done so by after gaining a friend, by treating something that is strange with kindness and confidence. So here's a picture of Mr. Tumnus responding to that kindness with equal friendship and bringing her home. All right. So what was it like to come home again for Lucy as we quickly wrap up? She rushes past these branches. She feels herself coming back to the wooden boards, and all at once she found herself jumping out of the wardrobe into the same empty room from which the whole adventure had started. She shut the wardrobe door tightly behind her and looked around, panting for breath. It was still raining, and she could hear the voices of the others in the passage. I'm here, she shouted. I'm here. I've come back. I'm all right. And that's the way chapter 2 ends. She has gone on a very interesting adventure, and she has been rather victorious on this adventure because her character has won her a friend, and he's shown his character by returning her safely to what is normal to her. Now, I want to leave you with a question about Lucy coming back. She's come back to something that is very normal, to this empty room with a wardrobe, but can that world be completely normal to her now? What is she going to do with this adventure? How does the Narnian adventure then affect her real world life? And what is she going to tell the others? Now, even from this last way that the passage ends, she says, I'm here, I'm all right. Her first response to coming back to the real world is to be kind to the people in it. She's making sure that her siblings are not worried about her, that everything's okay. She's trying to be a peacemaker to diffuse tense situations. And so we see in both the Narnian world and the Earth, her world, that she always approaches it with kindness and with confidence, despite her fears. So we'll have to wait for next week to see how things go when the Narnian world and our world meet up again, how Lucy is going to respond to her Narnian adventures, and how the others are going to respond to Narnia. Because next time we're going to see that Edmund does a thing. So we hope to see you back next time and consider a little bit more about the strange and familiar, and we'll start to see how our characters and these characters can grow as these two worlds, the strange and the familiar, come together. So just brief in closing, this is a camp put out by Signum Academy, which is part of Signum University. If you have any questions about what we've talked about today, or questions about the camp in general, about Signum University, you can email them to academy@signumu.org. If you have questions, I'll try my best to answer in email. And I might even respond to them in class next time, depending on what our time is like. And then if you want to know about Signum in general, just go to our website at signumuniversity.org, and you'll find quite a few resources and just information about who we are and all of our courses and program and whatnot. So that is all I have for you today. I hope that you have a great time doing the camp activities, and that you can go deeper into the first two chapters that we've read. There is so much ground that we can't cover. So I hope that your camp experience lets you do that. As I said, this time we focused on the strange and the familiar coming together, and the wonder that brings and how that changes us. And we're going to try to focus on that throughout the rest of the camp. But you'll probably have a lot of different things to talk about with your camp leaders if you're doing that. So I wish you all the best. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.